Hello, welcome to Media Careers Podcast. So, hello everyone, and welcome to MCP. My name is Beatrice, and today I'm joined by Laura Mason-Byers, who is a People Communication Manager at Gymshark. So, hello Laura, I'm very pleased to meet you. Thank you for taking time to meet me today. Could you introduce yourself more to our audience?
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you for having me. My name is Laura, and I work at Gymshark as our People Communications Manager, which basically means I head up our internal communications globally. So we have our main head office is in Solihull in the West Midlands in the UK, but we also have offices in Hong Kong, Mauritius, and in Denver, Colorado in the USA. So I manage our internal communications for the organisation, and basically that means it's my role to make sure that everybody in the business knows kind of what's happening and kind of what's relevant to them, and that we also have channels and platforms whereby they're able to communicate back into the business. So it's not just a top-down approach, but actually if they want to share their thoughts or communicate with different people in the business, that we've got the relevant kind of platforms and tools to be able to support that.
Okay, and I believe that to get to this position you are right now, you went through many experience, and time at Coventry University taught you something too. What
Yeah.
was your studies about?
So I studied communication, culture and media many moons ago at Coventry University, yes.
And why did you choose these particular studies?
I think I probably followed a natural passion really throughout school. I loved doing English, and as I suppose I got older, that then kind of moved over to kind of media studies when that was introduced. And I think kind of what's really important is to follow your passions, because ultimately whatever job that you end up in, it's quite likely you're going to be doing it kind of 5 days a week, probably more than 8 hours a day. So if you don't love it, kind of it's a really, I suppose, kind of negative way to kind of live your life. So if you can combine your kind of passions and your interests and also your skills with your profession, it just makes everything a lot easier. And I was very much on that route. So I wanted to make sure that my job was doing something that I enjoyed and something that I was good at. So that kind of was a natural step for me. So it wasn't that I was looking for a course that was specifically communication, culture and media, but I knew it wanted to be something in comms and media. And when I saw that one and read the description and also kind of looked at the facilities, I could see that the scope was so broad for me. Although I didn't know what I wanted to do as part of, like, I suppose, kind of my career and what that job would eventually look like, I knew that the course was broad enough that I could almost kind of pick modules that would take me in a direction whereby that would open lots of doors. And that was just really appealing to me.
Yeah, I do agree that we have to follow our passions, especially for students. Then
Yeah.
they don't know what to do after studies. We have to find something what they might like, what sounds interesting. So yeah, I totally agree with that. And
Yeah, I think one of the big things as well is after university, I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. And that's partly because I didn't know what jobs existed. It was actually by chance that I fell into communications and started off in external comms, so PR, and then moved over into internal comms later on in my career. But ultimately, it was very much a temp job that I got through a temping agency when I was just looking to kind of get some money in to go traveling around the world. So I kind of fell into a job in PR and comms, and that kind of, I suppose, led me in this path. Kind of by having that experience, I really enjoyed it and decided that actually I wanted to come back and then kind of keep pursuing that career. And I think it's hard because how will you know what jobs are out there and what the world of work the world of work is like until you actually experience it? So I think sometimes, I was lucky, but it can sometimes be a lot of trial and error, or potentially seeking out work experience with different organizations, because until you're in that mix, there's so many jobs that exist that I didn't even know were real jobs. So it is hard, I think, kind of when you leave university, because you've got all this kind of education, all these skills, but actually knowing where you can potentially input them into the day to day, it can be quite tricky. It really can be.
yeah, I agree. And in one of the interviews for the Coventry University,
Yeah.
as I know you talked, you gave interviews before, you mentioned that general university experience prepared you not just for the career, but for life. So is it
Mm.
related with what you said that you got more experience, not just for the studies, but some internships and some other work experience, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of life experience. I come from quite a small town. I'd only lived at home with my mum and dad. I was the oldest, well, I still am the oldest of my siblings. So nobody had ever left home before. So I suppose for me to have stepped out into the wide world outside of the framework that university provides, I probably would have struggled a lot more. So whereas I felt that actually kind of moving into a shared house and taking kind of steps where there was a lot of support and a lot of guidance was a nice kind of interim step between going out into the real world and kind of leaving my family home. So I definitely learned lots of things like kind of money management and finances, understanding how to pay a bill, what bills needed to be paid, things like just cooking for myself. I mean, I'm very lucky. My mom had always, kind of every day when I'd get home from school, my mom always, would have sort dinner out for me and my brothers. Didn't even need to think about it. Every day I know that there'd be a dinner prepared. So just I think kind of growing up really and taking responsibility for myself. And like I say, having the structure that university provides and the support to make sure that I was doing everything right and understanding exactly what needs to be paid when it needs to be paid. And I think kind of managing my own time and my own life, I just kind of, you do have a lot of freedom, especially if you're kind of living, kind of going for the residential experience as well. And I think it was good because everybody else was in the same boat at the same time. And we could lean on each other for support as well if we were stuck. So I think that was really important, and it instilled, I suppose, kind of a lot more kind of life skills than just the educational element of going to university, which ultimately, when I finished university, was then able to kind of, not straight away, but, kind of in the future, kind of purchase a home, just kind of live independently. And I think I just built up the confidence over those 3 years at university as you become more familiar with how to manage your kind of day to day.
Yeah, it sounds like it was quite challenging experience for a student from a little town going to university,
Mm,
paying your own bills, as you said. But at the same time, it sounds really relatable because I'm experiencing the same with the
yeah,
bills, with the cooking, and living on my own. Even though I have a lot of experience, freedom, and I can manage my time how I want, but at the same time,
yeah.
you still have to think about it. Yeah. So, all right. Since you finished university, you've been working in peer and communication, and later in intern communication for,
Correct.
in all is around 16 years. Is it that?
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's probably getting on for 17 years now. God, it sounds so long. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really long time. So you probably have a lot of experience then. And
Mm,
could you share more about your career path as you started working as in a Halford as a peer coordinator, later the
yeah.
communication manager in two different places, and now you work in a Gymshark in this big company as a people communication manager. So could you tell us more about how your whole career path started and how it's going? Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So, as I mentioned, I'd started off at Halfords, the kind of car and bike retailer. I suppose almost by fluke, in a PR coordinator role, which is a great experience because it was a really small team. It was a team of three, so it's really hands-on, and I got lots of exposure to the world of PR. I stayed there for a couple of years and then moved on. And I suppose the real reason I moved on was because it was such a small team. Unless somebody kind of changes roles or kind of leaves, there's not much opportunity for development. And I think I'd probably learn everything that I could learn within that kind of first role. So I decided to move to a PR agency, where I really wanted to work along different clients, trade and consumer, really kind of, I suppose, kind of learn the kind of the PR way, working, with different briefs, different budgets. So I did move to a PR agency, and it was, it was good fun, but I realized actually I preferred in-house live to agency. So an opportunity came up to work as a PR manager for a kind of national children's charity, which I took, again, kind of moving back in-house. However, it was a bit of a shame, really, because after a year, the funding that they'd hoped to kind of come through hadn't. And actually, in terms of taking the charity quite national, they wanted to kind of, I suppose, almost kind of replicate lots of local campaigns, and that didn't really stretch my ability at that time. So moved on, and moved to a fantastic role. It was agency, but it was agency with a different feel. And I spoke earlier about having a passion. This agency, all of their client base was tourist boards and hoteliers based in the US. So it was a travel marketing and PR agency, and I just love to travel, love the US. So it was a really good opportunity because it combined one of my real passions with my job. And I suppose because it was all kind of clients based abroad, it had a very much an in-house feel, because you felt like an extension of the, kind of different clients that were based internationally, because they were very reliant on us, because they didn't have the in-house knowledge, the in-country knowledge, or the kind of that face-to-face with the journalists and with the contacts. So you did have a very different feel to what a typical kind of agency life would be like. I love that job. I think it was fantastic. I got to take groups of journalists frequently over to the US on kind of press trips, showcase all different parts that you'd never really kind of think about going to, like in Midwest America, and just some fantastic states, and got to meet some great people. Also kind of, it was about being really creative, because ultimately you couldn't take everybody over to the US to get them to write about it. So it was thinking outside of the box as to how you could promote a destination without physically taking people there. So we used to hold a lot of events, and I really enjoyed all of that. At the same time, I decided that I wanted to start a family, and having 2 children while in that role, and combining that with the, I suppose, kind of the pressure to travel so much, kind of made me, I suppose, just kind of rethink things a little bit. And that's when I decided to take a role that was going to keep me, I suppose, a bit closer to home, or at least in the same country. And I left there after 5 years, and moved to a kind of very kind of corporate organization, contract caterers, that was into a internal comms role. It was a real large organisation, so 60,000 permanent employees and 30,000 temporary. So I'd gone from an organisation of 9 people to kind of 90,000. So very different. But what that did give me was the opportunity to work in lots of different roles in there. So I worked in the kind of the pay and benefits area, looking after internal comms, supporting the HR function, and then also there was lots of brands underneath an umbrella brand, and the company was Compass Group. So got a lot of different exposure, I suppose, kind of working in different facets of the business, which is really, really good. I was there for kind of 4 years, and then moved to my previous role, which was again kind of group internal comms manager, so looking after internal comms for a transport and logistics organization. And again, that was in it, I suppose, kind of an interesting role, because it's very much a 2P organization, so very much kind of client led, which meant that if you won a contract, you'd onboard loads of people. If you lost a contract, you'd lose a lot of people, and this could happen literally overnight. So it was definitely challenging. There was lots of siloed workers, lots of people working on sociable hours, a lot of people that didn't use technology. So that really, I suppose, kind of opened up the opportunity to be creative in different ways. And then that kind of brings me to my current role here at Gymshark. I suppose kind of had kept an eye on Gymshark. Ben Francis, our founder and CEO, is from the same town as I am. So it was very much a feeling of kind of local boy doing good. And I thought, when an opportunity comes up, because I'd seen the business kind of really skyrocket and be really successful, I thought, it'd be a really good role. I think, it's well known for, I think, kind of really positive employee engagement, looking after its staff. So when the role did come up, I went for it, and I got it, which is kind of great news. And it's been an interesting, I suppose, kind of role, because it was a new role. Nobody looked after internal communications. And actually during the pandemic, the business doubled in size. So they onboarded a lot of new people. And it was really important to them that they kind of maintain this great culture that they'd manifested over kind of the previous 8 years. So my role is really been to, I think, kind of do a bit of an audit, bring the internal comms into some type of structure and format, but then help kind of evolve the organization as it continues to grow and they continue to bring on more people, and make sure that we've got some really good kind of platforms and ways that people can communicate internally, whether that's from peer to peer, from top down, or kind of bottom up. So that's my career history in a bit of a nutshell.
Everything sounds very exciting and driven by passion, and with so many different experience and works, and it's probably even more behind when you comparing with what you told us. But moving forward and talking more about the job you are at
Yeah.
right now, could you describe what your workday looks like?
So no 2 days are the same, and I'm sure a lot of people say that, but they really aren't. For us, I suppose, kind of, so I lead a small team, and in terms of the day to day, we, I suppose, kind of, while it's different, I suppose we kind of undertake similar formats. So we will take on requests from the business. So it could be our legal team have perhaps got a new policy to launch. Perhaps it's one of our employee resource groups, like our gender equity group, want to run a kind of International Women's Day event. Whatever the briefs are, we'll kind of take a look at them and then look at how we can best communicate and support the business with them. We also kind of spend a lot of time working on our, I suppose, kind of owned communication. So how can we improve the way in which we communicate? So it would be, kind of potentially looking at, we use Slack as our kind of, I suppose, kind of employee engagement channel. How can we potentially kind of reduce some of the noise? How can we make sure that Ben, our CEO, is, kind of getting the right presence on there and is engaging with people, and people feel they can engage with him? How do we use email better? Are we spamming people? Is there too much going out? We also, kind of have a series of podcasts that we kind of produce. So we're kind of always working about how we can engage the internal employees more with that. Who do we want on our podcast? Who, kind of, how are views looking? A lot of analysis to kind of look at what we've done, what works, what doesn't work. There's so many kind of varied things, and the nice thing about the organization is that we're always kind of doing new things. We talk quite a lot about kind of failing fast, so failure isn't a negative for us here, but we, kind of, I suppose the failure is if we don't try, and because of that we often get a lot of kind of new concepts or kind of new programs of work kind of coming through to us that we're able to then, I suppose, kind of look at objectively and think really creatively about how we can kind of land this with our employees, because there's so many passionate people here that are doing a great job. They spend a lot of time working on campaigns, products, or programs of work, and ultimately they want to shout about it, and they want people to know, and they want the right people to know the right information. So it's down to us really to kind of be that final part of the puzzle to make sure that we're offering that level of service to the business.
Yeah, so your work days always are different, with new challenges, new
Definitely.
campaigns, and new ideas, and
Yeah.
yeah, so it's always going on something different. But I think it
Yeah.
really sounds interesting.
Yeah.
And what are skills needed in your profession to work to work in a position you work right
Yeah.
now? What are the
I think
skills person? Yeah.
I, in terms of the communications role, I think kind of the real key skills are being able to understand the audience, understand who we're trying to communicate with, and kind of what makes them tick. Obviously, kind of foundational elements have been like a good copywriter, kind of maybe having some kind of skills on Photoshop, although we do have a creative team that can kind of support with artwork requests. But, I think kind of one of the key skills is really about kind of people, understanding people, and how to get through to them is kind of a really key skill. And sometimes that's something that can't be taught. It's something that you can just kind of feel. The Gymshark culture is really important to us here. And I think just being able to kind of solidify that and being able to, I suppose, be an ambassador of that is also really important. And being creative and thinking outside of the box, we kind of say here as well that like best idea wins. So it doesn't matter what level of the business you're at, if you've got a really good idea and it's it's going to work for us as an organization, then we're all ears. We really are. Kind of, it's not hierarchical at all. It's very much about bringing your best self to the table, really. So I think they're kind of key skills to be in the kind of the comms team. In terms of being a manager and kind of managing a team, I think one of the key skills is again being good with people, understanding the strengths and also the weaknesses from the team, understanding their passions, and working kind of on those to help elevate them, lift them up, upskill them, and that way you definitely kind of get the best out of people.
Yeah, and I think that to be self-confident is quite important in this job too, as you shouldn't be afraid to share your ideas, and
Yeah.
yeah, and to communicate with people. And I believe that sometimes it might be quite challenging mentally while facing the challenges, especially taking care of other employees, of communicating with people. How do you deal with that? Maybe you have some little secrets or rituals that you could share with us?
I think that I'm a really organized person, and it's not like rocket science. I can't give you like a magic wand and say you need to do this because this will get rid of everything. But for me, probably mentally, every Monday, I do a team meeting with my team, and we run through our priorities for the week. And I have a list of to-dos every week in my kind of diary, journal, whatever you would like to call it, my notebook. And as I work through the week, I kind of tick those off. Sometimes I add things to it, and it kind of feels like it's growing rather than kind of reducing down. But ultimately, just I think kind of mentally, just seeing the ticks knows that I am progressing and doing the things that need to be done, and it keeps me really focused. In addition, we also have kind of where if there are times when people need additional support, whether that's kind of mentally or physically, the business has got lots of really good support services that can help you with that. For example, we have an on-site gym and loads of kind of professional coaches, so they can, if your output is to, kind of get physical, maybe kind of doing a class or just kind of having some downtime or having like a one-to-one with one of the coaches is really beneficial. We also have lots of kind of, I suppose kind of it sits under our kind of pay and perks team, but lots of, I suppose kind of mental wellbeing things. So we've got kind of apps, which have got things like mindfulness on. We've got support lines. If you just want to have a chat with somebody just to kind of air anything that you've got on your, on your chest. There's lots of different kind of ways in which the business can support you. They also provide free massages every month. You get a kind of entitled to a massage. So if you just want a bit of a de-stress, sometimes that's just quite nice, and you can kind of just escape for kind of however long, and lose yourself and come out feeling really refreshed. So there's lots of different things in I suppose in which we kind of help people mentally. Another thing we also have is kind of virtual tea breaks. So you're kind of paired up with another person, and it could be somebody you sit next to every day, or it could be somebody who's based in Hong Kong, the other side of the world. You're kind of paired up automatically through this kind of random generator, and then you kind of just jump on a half-hour Zoom call and you just have a chat. And you could have a chat about work, you could have a chat about your personal lives. You might find that you kind of align on, perhaps you've both got a great love of tennis, any type of random thing. And it's just half an hour just to have a little bit of, time away from the kind of the day to day.
So the company itself suggests a lot of like help for the employees to
Yeah.
to cope with their mental maybe issues or pressure. So yeah, that's really nice from a company, I would say.
Mm,
So from all your experience, which is various and different and sounds really inspiring, I would say. For the end of this wonderful meeting, what advice would you give to a person or a student starting their career in PR and communications?
yeah. I would advise you to go out there and try and get some experience. And I know work experience can be kind of hard to come by, but kind of put yourself out there, and sometimes it might take 100 no's to kind of get that one yes. But I think kind of having a foot in just to understand a bit more about the opportunities that are available is really insightful. And there's other ways in which kind of you're now able to kind of almost get that work experience. I think if COVID has taught us anything, it's that you can kind of virtually has opened the doors to so much. So actually kind of do your research, look at a lot of organizations have kind of internal Instagram accounts where you can see from the people that work there, kind of what their jobs are, what that involves. Quite often there's kind of a day in the life of. So do your research, but kind of go in with an open mind as well, because ultimately that will then open your eyes to so many different opportunities. And it might not be what you originally had in plan, kind of perhaps when you left you thought you wanted to be a journalist, but actually you discovered that being a middleweight kind of creative was more your calling, but you didn't realize what that involved until you kind of got into an organization, or perhaps spoke to somebody that did that role, and it really kind of piqued your interest. So for me it would be I think having an open mind and kind of getting that experience and talking to people, connect with people on LinkedIn, ask questions, ask the questions that you really want to know. Don't kind of hold back, because people will really, they'll admire that, and I think they'll remember it as well.
So the passion is kind of a key, I would
Mm,
say, to be passionate about what you're doing. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a really good advice you gave to all the students, no
Yeah.
matter what are they doing, even, I would say. So with this incredible advice, we will finish our podcast. So thank
Thank
you,
you.
Laura. Thank you for meeting with me today. It was a real pleasure. And for the audience, I want to say thank you for listening, dream big and have fun.